Hey guys, it's Rose, and I know I'm wearing exactly the same thing as I was in that update video from a couple days ago. I'm filming it at the same time. Shh. Illusion shattered. Right now I am having a little bit of a quandary. I am not going to finish one of the books from my January TBR pile. Like, at all. I am actually just putting this down, and I am going to admit defeat, which I hate doing. I always finish books, always, always. I've had books that I've picked up and I've ended up reading them over the course of a year or more because I am just so determined to slog through to the end. And so having to give up on a book is really kind of upsetting for me, especially because, this is the crux of my issue, it's not actually a bad book. Let me explain. The book to which I am referring is The Wake by Paul Kingsnorth, and you may have remembered me talking about it when I did my January TBR, and I will put the link down below if you wanted to have a little watch. And this is a book that I picked up because it ticks a lot of my good boxes, my good idea boxes. It is a historical fiction, which we all know is my absolute favorite genre. It was up for the Man Booker Prize in 2014, and award-winning or award-nominated is usually a good thing. It also had a recommendation quote on the cover by Philip Pullman, who is a fantastic author. I love his work. And finally, it has a really interesting way of dealing with words and with language. And another thing you may have noticed from some of my other reviews is that I really love when an author doesn't just have a great story, but does something really cool with the actual words on the page. It's something that I just happen to enjoy. To give you a little bit more background on it, it is told from the perspective of a character called Buckmaster Holland. That may also be a title of his. I don't know if Buckmaster is a name or a title at this point. It takes place in England in the Lincolnshire Fens in the year 1066 after the Normandy invasion, and it focuses on English resistance to the new rule of England. It sounds like it should be really, really cool. This is a very little known part of history. It goes back a very long time, which is also really cool for me to read about because I often focus on sort of more middle and recent history. So I was really, really excited about this. So why does it have me stumped? Unfortunately, the most interesting thing about this book was also my absolute downfall, and that is that Paul Kingsnorth decided that in order to give the book the most authentic feel that he could, that he would create and write the entire thing in what's called a shadow tongue, which is essentially a modernized take at how it would have been spoken and written at the time in which it takes place. So if you were writing about, say, Chaucer, you would be writing in Chaucer's English. If you were writing about Shakespeare, you would be writing in Shakespearean English. And this is a really cool concept. This is a linguistic thing that got me so excited to read the book. And I just completely underestimated how hard it was. I'll show you a little of the book, and this is the page where I gave up. So I'm just going to cut to a little bit of the book itself. So I don't know how much of that you really got, but on first glance, this is just a completely different language. It confused the crap out of my man creature when he saw me reading it in bed and was just like, are you just reading random languages now? What are you doing? The basics of it is that it is phonetic. Most of the sentences are modern words, but they're spelled phonetically, and phonetically of someone who is using a bit of a dialect and has a bit of an accent, just to make it really fun. It's interspersed with a smattering of words that are not phonetic or not modern at all, and luckily there is a glossary in the back of the book, so you can flip through and find those words. It would have been way better to know that right when I started reading rather than figuring it out like 50 pages in because I got so confused. There's essentially no grammar, no capitalization, no punctuation. Even the paragraph breaks are very different, are very new to read. A lot of the sentences are run-on. And just to top all that up, just to top all that off, just as if it wasn't difficult enough to have all that, it's also told in the form of sitting by a fire and hearing this story straight from Buckmaster Holland's mouth as he recollects it. So he kind of drifts off at times and puts in his own thoughts and then goes back to telling the story. And it's remarkably hard. I thought this would be a lot easier to read, but it's actually really difficult. And unfortunately, having to flip back and forth to the glossary makes it exponentially harder. If it was just dealing with the phonetics and the lack of grammar, I could just be sounding everything out. You'd pick it up and go along. But then as soon as I feel like I'm getting a bit of a rhythm and getting into it, I've just come across this word, and then I don't know if it's in the glossary, and then if it's not in the glossary, I have to go back and try to sound it out in 10 or 15 different ways before I finally hit on what that word means. And by the time all of that is done and I've figured out that word, I have then forgotten the paragraph that became the paragraph that came before it. And so I have to go back and reread, and I found myself rereading and getting lost and going back over and over and over and over, and it was so exhausting. More than anything else, the writing reminded me of forum posts and commenters online who cannot use the English language to save their lives or get their point across. And if you've ever come across those and you get these run-on sentences and you're just like struggling to understand the meaning, this entire book is like that, but with phonetic spellings for every single word and the inclusion of a bunch of words that don't even exist. It was just so exhausting, and I gave up about a quarter of the way through. I don't even want to say gave up. I kept intending to go back to reading it, but it felt like work. It felt like I was back in school and having to force myself to study a subject that I really didn't want to, except that in this case, there's no chance that reading this is going to get me into university or do something useful in the rest of my life other than make me feel a little bit accomplished, which just made it so much harder. So it sat on my bedside table for a good few weeks, and I renewed it at the library, and it took me a while before I finally went, you know what, no. Because as much as I think that reading should challenge you, it should stretch you, it should make you consider different things, and it should do more than just be pure bubblegum enjoyment, this was just taking that way too far. And the thing is, I read for fun. I read because I love it, and I think that when you have a book and you think of reading it and it just makes you go, ugh, life is too short. Put the book down. Walk away. Maybe if this wasn't a library book, so I didn't have the pressure to read it within a specific period of time, or maybe if I had more free time, or even any free time, then it wouldn't seem like such a forced labor and I would be able to do it. But this was just, it's like wading through molasses, and life is too short. I am so sorry, and the worst bit about it is that on the rare occasions in the past that I have just thrown up my hands and given up on a book, it's been because it's really, really, really bad. It's because there's been some flaw with the writing or the character or the plot or something, and it's also been so hard to get through that I haven't been able just to read it in one sitting and go, ugh, that was awful, throw it away. 50 Shades of Grey. And I feel so much worse about this one because I think it's really cool still. I have so much respect for Kingsnorth and the fact that, my God, I know how hard it is to write a book in a language that I speak every day, and I've never tried to make up a totally different language all of my own. So to think of how hard, how much work went into creating an entire book, and then creating an entire shadow language, and then rewriting the book in that, my mind is just, it's amazing. And the language is really impressively done, and from a critical perspective, I can look at it and go, wow, this is really amazing, and this is so well done, and this is so handcrafted language here, and I want to love it. I want to love it so much, but I just can't do it. In conclusion, I would still say maybe give this book a try. I would still have this in the back of my mind as maybe one day, if I suddenly find myself with a huge chunk of time on my hands and nothing to do but read, then I would totally pick this back up again and try to really work through the language. And I don't want to write it off or say that it's a bad book, because it's not. But I just, right now, I cannot finish it. Did you enjoy my ranting? Sometimes you need to rant. Sometimes you need to rant at the camera, especially about something like this that is so cool on one hand and just so stranglingly frustrating on the other. If you've read any books like that, if you have any books that you are wading through but you desperately want to love, or that had something really cool that was the best bit and also the most impossible bit at the same time, then tell me. I am not going to read them because I just don't want to add more frustration to my life, but I probably want to put them on the leave these books alone list, to be never read pile. And also because it's interesting to hear about that. Obviously as well, if you've read this book, if you have managed to finish it, I would love to know about it. I would love to know what happens if you want to give me the cliff notes. So comment and let me know, and have a great night. Bye.